Welcome to episode 2 of the SRPAA's new webinar series, Reimagining the Why of Real Estate and Infrastructure Built with Humanity. Our goal is to engage our alumni community and the industry leaders to explore their feelings, aspirations, and ideas for reimagining how we do business to create a healthier, happier, and more equitable planet. The series is produced in collaboration with the Brookfield Center in Real Estate and Infrastructure at the Schulich School of Business, which has two amazing programs, the MBA Specialization in Real Estate and Infrastructure and the Master of Real Estate and Infrastructure program. Today's episode is called Authenticity at Work, Building with Purpose, and features the stories of 4 industry leaders about linking personal values to work, career, and living with authenticity. This week's episode is generously sponsored by our friends at Fundscraper, with proceeds going to Habitat for Humanity in the GTA. Now, my name is Lirad Kligman. I'm acting as host today, and it's my privilege to introduce you to our 4 amazing panelists and our moderator. So starting with David Sauvé. David is a vice president at Stantec Consulting, an international multidisciplinary architecture, engineering, design, and project management firm. David has passionately volunteered for Habitat for Humanity for many years. He was elected to Habitat for Humanity Canada's National Board of Directors in May 2016 and was recently elected as chair of the board. David holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, a Master's in Urban and Regional Planning, both from Queen's University, and an MBA from the Schulich School of Business. Thank you, David, for joining us. Next up, we've got Caroline Rojala. Caroline is Director of Impact Lending at Van City Community Investment Bank. She leads a team that originates debt financing for commercial real estate projects that have a positive community or an environmental impact, specializing in financing for affordable housing, social purpose, real estate, green building, and heritage properties. Caroline is a member of the board of directors for the Canadian Urban Institute and is a graduate of the Schulich School of Business MBA program. Thanks, Caroline. Next up, we've got Salima Rauji. Salima is Vice President Development for Creatio, the City of Toronto's real estate agency. Salima is a city builder committed to the advancement of both the real estate industry and her broader community. She sits on the International Council of Shopping Centers P3 National Advisory Committee and the Ryerson University Real Estate Management Advisory Council. She's a director for Civic Action, the Toronto Foundation, and is a Women's Leadership Initiative Champion, a 2010 Diversity Fellow, and holds an MBA from the Rotman School of Business at U of T. Thank you, Salima. And we've got Jeffrey Grayhurst. Jeffrey is a president of Dorsey Development Corporation and is responsible for setting and implementing the corporate strategy of the company. Dorsey is an established real estate development and investment company active in both residential development and commercial acquisitions, and develops and owns properties in many joint ventures throughout the GTA. Mr. Grayhurst has been involved in real estate in the GTA for over 20 years. He sits on the board of RealPAC and RLabs and holds a BCom degree in economics and an MBA from the Schulich School of Business. Thank you, Jeffrey. And moderation today will be done by Andre Kuzmicki. Andre is executive in residence at the Brookfield Center in Real Estate and Infrastructure at the Schulich School of Business. He's the former executive director of the center and was the founding director of its innovative Master of Real Estate and Infrastructure program. Andre currently serves as a director of Chartwell Retirement Residences and Dorsey Development Corporation, and is a member of the advisory boards of Assess plus RE, Fundscraper, Nix Capital, and Basecamp Resorts. Andre holds a BA and an MBA from McGill University. So from here on, I will pass it on to Andre.
Thank you, Lirad, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you panelists for being here. I just want to say a couple of things before we get going. 2 things really. One is, the title of the series, Reimagining the Why of Real Estate and Infrastructure. And what I have to tell you is that there isn't a corporation on this planet, there's not a REIT, there's not a development company, there's not a financial institution that has even an ounce of imagination. Imagination is something that people have. So it's the people who work in these organizations and the people who are not necessarily working in the organizations who have the imagination. And one of our goals and aspirations with this series is really to inspire everyone to use your imagination and to consider how we can make a better world together. The second thing I want to mention is the actual inspiration for this episode in particular, and it also infuses, I think, the series as a whole, and that is a quote from the 1970s. The quote comes from Joseph Campbell, and you've probably seen this quote because it's on greeting cards all over the place. The quote is, "Follow your bliss." In fact, the first time I saw that was on a greeting card, and I'm not sure who got it in our house, but somebody did. My wife put it on the mantle in the family room, and I watched it. It stood there for years, and I watched it. And at first, I was trying to say to myself, what is Joseph Campbell telling me? You know, is he telling me that I should work my butt off and make as much money as I can to buy all the things that might make me happy? And I didn't think that was the answer, but that's as far as I could get with it. And over time, what I've come to realize is that when you follow your bliss, what that means is really listening to your heart and recognizing in what situations and with what people and in what activities and with what ideas you really come to life, and then migrate yourself in that direction. And when you do that, you find over time, you'll find the true path, your true path. And your true path, what that is where you will, and the way in which you will write your best life story. The story in which you have most fully realized yourself and your potential, the story in which you have grown the most, and the story in which you have made the most profound impact on your community and the people that you love. So those are the two things, you know, use your imagination, follow your bliss. Now with that, I'm going to move on and just tell you very quickly what the format is today. In a moment, we're going to pose 3 questions to the audience, 3 quick questions. That's really just to get your temperature, so to speak. And then we're going to move to the little snippets or chapters of life stories of each of our panelists. And when we've heard from them, we're going to go into Q&A. And as far as the Q&A is concerned, I encourage you to use the chat line for whatever, you know, the chat function on Zoom to make comments or say hi or whatever you like to do. But when you ask questions for the panel, please use the Q&A. That's where we'll look for the questions. So with that, I'm going to ask Lirad, I guess, to go ahead and maybe we can pose the first of these questions. When you answer these questions, don't spend a lot of time thinking about it too much. Just what's your gut quick reaction? Give us the answer, and then we'll move on. How long am I going to let these questions go for, Lirad? Maybe 30 seconds or so?
Yep, exactly.
It looks like almost 70% of our audience feels fully engaged with their work. I think that's terrific, terrific answer. And it'd be interesting as we go through a Q&A or the comments to hear what it is that's keeping you so engaged in the work that you do. Lirad, should we can share these results, I guess, with the panel, with the audience?
Yes, we can. Everyone should be seeing it right now, so we can move on to number 2.
When resolving a difficult business decision, what's your go-to move? You're going to look to your boss, you're going to weigh the pros and cons, you're going to see how you feel about things. All right, I think we can probably stop that poll now, so and share the results. So it looks like about half our people went to business school, and they're going to weigh the pros and cons. And some of us are going to listen to our boss, and some of us are going to feel our way. Okay, Lirad, what about question 3? Which of the following people would you admire most? Oprah, Zuckerberg, or Warren Buffett? Not seeing a lot of votes for Mark Zuckerberg just yet.
It's hurting today.
Well, we can probably stop it now, Lirad. Looks like Buffett edging out Oprah Winfrey, and there's a couple of votes for Mark Zuckerberg. And we're going to find out how our panel feels about these results, maybe as we get past the stories and into the Q&A and discussion a little bit. So with that, I think we can stop sharing if you can control that, Lirad, the results, and move on to the stories. And I'd like to invite David Sauvé, who has been introduced as a big shot at Stantec, but it's also about Habitat for Humanity and what he's put into that organization. I'd love to hear from you, David.
Great. Can you hear me okay, Andre?
Yeah, good to me.
Excellent. So thanks for having me today. I guess as I sort of started thinking about, oh, I'm still getting notes on my screen. As I started thinking about what I wanted to say today, I thought it would be good just to start off a little bit with my background and how I originally got involved. So I've worked at Stantec a long time. I've been there since '04, and then I sort of chipped away at my MBA part-time in the evenings, graduated in late '07. And when I wrapped that up, it was, you know, before I had kids, so I had more time. and decided I wanted to involve myself with a nonprofit that was active in city building and real estate development, because that was, where my passion lies, like most of you here. And in my mind, city building really only is successful if it considers all people in society and all socioeconomic classes. So I was really attracted to the idea of volunteering for a nonprofit, because I feel those of us that have had some level of success in life and some level of luck, like myself, really do have an obligation to, help other people who maybe have been less lucky through no fault of their own. So about the same time, I saw a posting, I think it was on the Altruist Board of Directors sort of website, and it was for Habitat for Humanity York Region. And this would have been March or April 2009, I think. And immediately got very excited, thought it'd be a great potential fit. And their model really resonates with me for a couple of reasons. So I wanted to highlight those today. The first up is we have a motto of hand up, not a handout. So families are expected to donate, or donate's not the right word, put in 500 hours of sweat equity as their down payment. So that would be literally building their house, hammering nails, or working at one of our restores, which is our social enterprise where we sell new and gently used product. And then it's not always well known, but the houses are not given away. So we actually sell them at fair market value and restrict payments to what the families can afford. So I thought that was a pretty cool piece of the puzzle. And the mortgages are a combination of no interest loans held by Habitat, and then also interest-bearing loans with conventional banks for what the families can afford based on their income. So this concept of hand up, not hand out really resonates with me, because I believe pretty strongly in the value of hard work to achieve goals, as opposed to luck or being handed stuff along the way. The other big thing that was important to me was just the whole concept of affordable housing and what a huge problem it was in the GTA in Canada and continues to be. And in fact, I would say it's really getting worse. So currently in the GTA, 1 in 5 families are in need of what's called core housing. So that refers to crowding, unhealthy, unsafe, or unaffordable housing. And the families we serve are hardworking yet low income. They often come from existing neighborhoods where there's crime, or their existing apartment might be substandard and it might be causing their kids health issues like asthma or that sort of thing. The other thing that resonated with me is that the benefits to the families are quite significant. So back in 2015, Boston Consulting Group did a study that indicated that for every dollar invested, there's $4 in societal value created by Habitat. So that might come in the form of property taxes by homeowners, avoiding social housing costs, increased income taxes as a result of better economic outcomes. And then there's, the really transformational impact. So better job prospects for parents, improved health, and better educational outcomes for children. So over the last 3 decades, Habitat GTA has built 22 new communities. So the impact is great. I thought that was kind of awesome. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that the work has never been more important. So over the last decade, would you believe that the price of homes has increased by 4.5 times the rate of income growth? So that's a crazy differential. And it's really becoming a city of haves and have-nots as it relates to households. And then the COVID-19 crisis has been really interesting as well, right? Because the government tells us, go at home, shelter in place, everything's going to be great at your house. And of course, it's far from safe for many of the families we try to help. These families, they live in extreme health and mental stress as a result of crowding, poor ventilation, mold, unsafe neighborhoods, you name it. So I would recommend, there's a great Doug Saunders article in the Globe and Mail last weekend that I would encourage people to read. And then in terms of how my own role has evolved, I got involved in Habitat York Region. We were a fledgling affiliate doing, 1 or 2 builds a year. And I'll be honest, it was kind of frustrating because I was putting in, I don't know, 8 or 10 hours a month. And I really felt we weren't having that much impact. So a really fun and exciting thing happened in late 2013. We got together with the 2 neighboring affiliates, Habitat Toronto and Habitat Brampton, Canada, to create Habitat GTA. And our goal, we had a very high goal set. We wanted to build more homes and serve more families than any of us could have achieved separately. The other awesome thing we did at that time was we hired a fabulous CEO, Ian Underwood, who still leads our organization today. And she's, for those that have not met her, she's very passionate and a great business leader. And we've hovered around 30 new builds for the last 5 years, 30 new builds per year. And really, really proud to say that this year, in spite of COVID, we estimate that we're going to serve 50 families. So it's going to be one of the top years in the history of our organization. And then I'd like to give a shout out to some of the partner organizations that really collaborate with us on builds that really make our lives easier. So Create Toronto, where Salima works, is a great partner to us. Daniel's organization, Martin Blake is the current chair of the board for GTA, and he's been a long time leader at Daniel's. Diamond Corporation, Kilmore, we do work with Tribute. So a lot of developers have really stepped up and been awesome partners for us. So I stepped down from the Habitat GTA board this June, but I'm involved in the Habitat Canada board since 2016, as been noted earlier. And I recently became the chair, so that was a very awesome and humbling experience. So I'm very excited to be in that role. And we just went through a great process as well. We added a new CEO, Julia Deans, who's been with us for a few months, and secured record funding from CMHC, which has also been awesome. And notwithstanding the impact of COVID, we're off to a great start this year. And then I'd just like to wrap up by saying, a lot of people will ask, why have you volunteered for 11 years? You've had 2 kids, you've had a busy job, lots of things to do at home. And I would say the most powerful moment would be when you attend a groundbreaking or a key ceremony, and the family moves in, and you get a chance to meet the family, shake their hands, meet their kids, hear about the challenges they've endured and why this day is so important to them. And I would say that's really what pushes you to keep volunteering and what makes it so special for everyone. And there's, rarely a dry eye at a groundbreaking. So that's the inspirational moment that kind of stays with me. So those were the highlights, Andre.
David, thanks very much. And let me thank you on behalf of everyone for the work you've been doing, because that's, you've made an enormous contribution of your time and your energy to Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you.
Carolyn, we're going to move over to you. You got a story to share. Love to hear it.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Andre, and thank you for having me. So I'll share a similar little bit of background on my career and how I got to where I am today. So I started my real estate career when I was an MBA student at Schulich, and that's how I got into real estate. And then spent 7 years working commercial banking, focused mostly on real estate lending. And as it was time to figure out what to do next, heard about this opportunity at a new bank called Van City Community Investment Bank that was really just getting started. And so that was something I did 3 years ago, and it's been an amazing opportunity. To tell you a little bit about what we do, Van City Community Investment Bank is Canada's first impact bank, which means that we work exclusively with partners and clients that have a positive community or environmental impact in what they do. So my team focuses on real estate lending, which means we get to work a lot on affordable housing, green building, heritage properties, community hubs, et cetera, and doing financing for those areas. So it's an opportunity I'm really glad that I've had. And I think, going back to what Andre said at the beginning about following your bliss or figuring out what your passions are, for me, that was sort of key to making that decision. And I think it's what's, made it a worthwhile decision and makes going to work every day worthwhile. It's just that in reflecting on the things that I was excited about or wanted to do, I realized that was actually really connected to what my personal values were. And so, looking around, similar to what David said, in terms of Toronto, which is, my hometown and where I live, a few years ago, it was very clear the impact of sort of rising inequality and climate change that we're going to have, on everyone. And so being able to work for an organization that, takes a clear stance on that, and where it's something you get to talk about, and, it drives all the decisions that we make as a company, has allowed me to sort of, work on things I'm interested in, and going back to what the title of the session is, authenticity at work, have alignment between my personal and professional values. So, so I guess that's really what I wanted to say, and just talk sort of about how, what a great opportunity that is, and that, if you are connected to the values of your organization, then I think that it makes maybe more difficult aspects of your job feel worthwhile. And I think that it's sort of just a really great opportunity, and you'll find that it's definitely worthwhile. So I think I'll end there.
Okay, Carolyn, thank you. We're going to have questions for you coming up, but next I'd like to just turn to Salima. Salima's went to a different school. We're not going to, give you.
We'll skip that part of the story.
But thank you for joining us, Salima. And let's hear about Creatio and what you're doing over there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to just tell a little bit of my story. I was born and raised in Vancouver, but starting when I moved to Toronto, I was working in the arts sector. I was working down at Harbourfront Centre, producing arts festivals, working with community, and I absolutely adored my job. I fell in love with the city, with the communities in the city, which is so many aspects of what our great city had to offer. But I was doing precarious work. I was going contract to contract. I did not feel like I could build a life as I saw it. I felt a responsibility to, in the future, be able to care for my parents, have children, build a family. And so I decided at that point that I was going to go back to business school. I chose the other school, as we've talked about. And the whole way along, I thought that I would probably end up in some sort of nonprofit or social enterprise I dabbled with. But I met, as a professor, Mitchell Goldhar. And he really, really made an impact on me, so much so that I ended up going and working for him. And I spent about 5 or 6 years at Smart Centers. And I felt as though I had found my calling. Real estate made sense to me. It was intuitive. I was, figured out that I was pretty good at what I did. But as the time passed and I became better at the work that I did, I felt a void, and I felt a lack of the breadth of thinking about community in the work that we did. There was a singular focus, and that was the focus of the organization, and it was very good at what it did, but it wasn't filling me the way that I wanted to be in my work. And perhaps in reflection, because I had that experience at Harbourfront Centre where I had that full up feeling, I really felt the void. And so an opportunity came up at the time at Build Toronto. And Build Toronto was an agency of the City of Toronto. Toronto itself has an incredibly huge real estate portfolio. And it was led at the time by Lauren Braithwaite, who was a serious real estate leader. And so I was attracted to the opportunity. And when I got there, I found an incredible fit for myself, and a place where an organization that thought about not just financial returns, but also city building returns. Andre and I were talking, just getting ready for this call, and I sort of said to him, and I said, I think that they gave me a little bit of freedom because I was junior and probably weren't paying as much attention to what I was working on than some of the bigger deals that were happening. But what that resulted in was an opportunity to really find creativity between, the gray space between the economics and the community. And a great example of that is a project that I worked on that I got to do from start to finish, ideate to project sale, which is the end of the life cycle at Build Toronto. And that was called the Waterworks project. It's at 505 Richmond. under construction right now with great partners to the organization. Woodcliff Partners, run by Eve Lewis, and Mod Developments, run by one of your alumni, Narez Alani, and his partner, Gary Switzer. But that project was really about taking a piece of property, honoring its history, which in this case was one of the very first food markets in Toronto, the same generation as St. Lawrence Market, St. Patrick's Market. This was St. Andrew's Market. It was also neighboring a park that was one of the very first public playgrounds in Toronto. So really long history, had also then become an employment era program, which actually constructed the Waterworks building. So there was this very rich history. And through the work that we were able to do at Build Toronto, we were able to honor that history, put together a mixed use program that involved listening to the community and what their needs were. And at the time it was a swimming pool that the city itself could not provide. So, found a partner in the YMCA, asked for the ground floor uses to be always publicly accessible because it had been a public space. And so Eve Lewis brought forward a great food program honoring the food hall heritage of the building. And then of course, everything that we did at Build Toronto and everything we do now at Creatio really focuses on affordable housing. And so affordable housing was brought forward in this case in lots of our projects. As David mentioned, we work with Habitat, but in this case through Artscape. So really bringing a creative aspect to the project as well. And then the economics of the deal really with luxury condos. And so I feel privileged to be able to be in a position where I get to live my values in the work, but also prove out a business model that says it's possible to make money, to build projects that make sense architecturally from a mixed use perspective that serve community, but also have success financially, that the banks will underwrite and support, but that the community is just as excited to see happen, and that leave a neighborhood better off than they found it. And so we continue with that work at Creatio. The work looks a little bit different. It has a little bit of a different mandate. I'm serving mostly the city departments and working on affordable housing, but that ethos is still there, and I feel blessed every day to do the work that I get to do.
Salima, this is a great segue to Jeff, because he's a grubby developer, looking after the bottom line. And it's a contrast because, David's doing nonprofit charity work, which by definition is good. And what Carolyn is doing is directly meant to have a social impact. And then Salima, you've just shown us how you can do those things and do it profitably, which is part of the mandate of Creatio. But Jeff doesn't have that mandate. He just wants to make some money for his shareholders. So Jeff, tell us about what you're going to do about all that.
Well, thanks for having me, Andre. And I think the private sector can also do a bit of good. So let me just start with that. I've been running Dorsey for 20 years now, but I've been in the industry for 30 years. What initially attracted me is that real estate's a people industry. And you need to make connections with a whole myriad of people, including fellow employees, partners, consultants, and bankers to be successful. I've always gravitated to any position where I can foster a wide range of strong relationships with great people and try to surround myself with them. I've come to realize that most people really do want to do the right thing, especially if they're given the opportunity. And in developing all these relationships, I think it's very important to deal with people with integrity and respect. Over the years, I've been very fortunate to develop a strong network of business contacts that I can rely upon for almost anything, and vice versa. Speaking about Toronto, I'm really excited about the way the GTA is evolving. I've traveled extensively in my many years, and I love experiencing new cultures and people, and I've been very fortunate to have visited many natural wonders on this planet. While the GTA is not perfect, and affordable housing is one of the issues that we're facing, I do think it is the best example of a diverse, inclusive, and welcoming large metropolitan area in the world. We should all be very proud, but also strive to make continual improvements. I've also been slightly frustrated over the years that we seem to be developing new systems, processes, and technologies that make things ever more complex and more time-consuming. but with very little focus on a larger goal or purpose of what we're trying to achieve. So when we acquired a large parcel of land in Pickering, about 1,000 acres 7 years ago, we decided to undertake an exercise in imagining how to develop a major mixed-use community with a completely different approach. We've been greatly influenced by experts on vision and committee that we formed many years ago, and amazing groups of consultants and our strong employees. We've decided to create a community where the everyday extraordinary is possible. We spent time branding the community and naming it. It's called Verain. During this exercise, we developed brand identifiers. Verain's a world-class, purpose-built community designed to renew the land, create a dynamic sense of place, fuel opportunity for individuals and enterprises. We do it through groundbreaking practices in environmental and social placemaking that foster a more healthful way of life. We call everyday extraordinary. Its purpose is to bravely develop precedent-shattering standards of community development so that individuals and the environment can thrive together. Its values are to always find a way, design bravely, stay positive, and to share opportunity. Its personality is imaginative, tenacious, optimistic, and intelligent. Some of the practical things that we have been planning include increased green spaces with extensive trails with an extensive trail system, mixed forms of housing within neighborhoods and within streets that attract a wide range of residents from diverse incomes, backgrounds, and ages. Innovative stormwater management solutions, and reducing private green space and maximizing public areas. We've also developed a unique set of community planning principles to create a community that thrives, a complete community, and a connected community. I've been greatly energized and encouraged by the enthusiasm that our approach in our community design has garnered from our shareholder, our employees, our consultants, municipal staff, politicians, and the limited public exposure to date. And I firmly believe that people want to work and live in an extraordinary community, and I'm very fortunate to have been involved in its creation thus far.
I got a question for you.
Of course.
Well, I'm going to ask this question, but before I do, I'm going to invite the audience now to ask questions, to engage with the panelists. And if you want to do that, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. And while we're waiting for a question or two from the audience, Jeff, you know, my question is, you said you wanted to take a different approach in this case. And the question I have really is why, and what motivated you? You know, where was the inspiration? We're going to do this completely different, because as someone who sits on your board and has been involved to some degree in this project and been able to witness, I mean, I do think it's incredibly different. And I love it, but I don't know why you do it. So tell me about that.
Well, I think the opposite. I think I've been a bit frustrated. I've been in this industry for a long time, since the mid-'80s, and we keep on making incremental changes. But fundamentally, things have not changed that much that we were developing things as they have in the 80s or 90s. And this opportunity was a blank slate. It was a large parcel of land. There was a planning timeframe to move forward. And it gave the opportunity to say, if we're to start this whole process over, what would we do differently? What are the opportunities? And I think that's something that I identified early on that excited me. And I got a lot of great advice from a lot of people on how we can try to get that done.
Okay, thanks. So listen, I'm going to throw out a question to the panel, and really, question is really, I like to hear from everybody because I think everybody's got a different story, but there must be something, one thing, or maybe more than one thing in your journey that you've been talking about that was a very difficult moment for you, or a difficult hurdle to get across, a problem to solve, a decision to make, where it was tough. And I just wonder if you could share as much as you can what that might have been for you, and what it is that, you know, how you found the the solution or the courage or whatever it took to sort of get past that and continue in the direction you're going. And I don't know who wants to go first. Carolyn, I'm going to ask you, okay, because I know where you started and I'd like to hear more about it.
For sure, yeah. So for me, the career transition that I made was somewhat of a difficult one. And part of that journey that I didn't mention was that I actually took time off to travel between switching my jobs. And that was an amazing thing to do and something I was very lucky to be able to do. Also pretty terrifying at times because it's cool to say, oh, I'm going to go traveling. But then, you know, you might at night be like, oh, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Or will I ever work again? And that was something I really actually did worry about. And also just, you know, what would I do? And so not to skip ahead to the recommendations, but I will say one of the things I did is that I was, you know, had a chance to listen to a lot of like podcasts and different things that you just don't have time to do or actually just sit and think when you're working every day. And I found that most of the ones that sort of focused on like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you think is worthwhile? What centers you? Including what will be my recommendation I'll share later. But that actually really centered me, and that also just being sort of away from whatever, you know, the rat race and just spending time with your family and the people that you're very close to was a really good way of also centering and figuring out what you want to do. And I think that's what ultimately gave me the freedom to make the decision that I made, and that it didn't, in the end, it wasn't a hard one, but it was something I worried about a lot, you know. And now it seems like a really obvious choice, but I questioned myself a lot. But going back to what you said, I think you have to actually like stop listening to the noise and listen to yourself. And, you know, what do you actually care about and what do you want to do with your life? And you have limited time here. So don't do like something to impress someone else. Do something that based on your own values. So.
Yeah, thank you. David, how about you? You got something you can throw at us?
Sure. So, I mean, you know, the decision to become part of Habitat was pretty easy in the sense that I still had the safety of my job. I'm not getting paid to do it. So, you know, I could easily make that jump. But I would say going back, something courageous that I did earlier in life would have been, so I grew up in St. John's in Eastern Canada. And so making the jump to move to Ontario for school was nerve-wracking at a time when basically all my friends stayed at home, and you know, money wasn't growing on trees for my family, so it was kind of tough. But I think that one pivotal decision put me in a great spot to just kind of realize I had the ability to do whatever I wanted to do, and I should choose something that made me happy more than made a big buck. So
Every great story always has that moment where you accept a risk and you go for it, right? There's
yeah.
risk. If you don't take risks, you don't go forward. So Lima, was it getting out of the one thing and going into the other, or what was it for you?
I don't think so. Like, I think for me, it's been more about doing trailblazing projects. If I am gonna toot my horn there for one moment, there's two projects that the ones that I'm most proud of in my history at Creatio. One, a commercial shopping center, straight up commercial shopping center that we developed and built and sold last year for a 5 cap, but by a city organization. It was very different. We didn't have the machinery, you know, that typical developers do. We didn't have the trust in the tenancies that, you know, the retailers came to us with a lot of questions and a lot of tentativeness. And then the Waterworks project was very complex, building a YMCA, free land, putting all those uses together in a historic building, just things that people around me weren't comfortable with. And if I think about those projects, there was a lot of naysayers a lot of the way through the projects. Every moment, people were saying this can't happen. You're not going to be under construction in December for your shopping center. Your tenants are going to pull out. You're never going to be able to get the you know, guarantees on the loans that you need for the YMCA, whatever it happened to be. And I think for me, the approach to drown out the noise was to really just break it down to like very small incremental tasks that led up to a whole. So that idea of being able to be in the audience and be on the stage at the same moment and just focusing on line by line what had to happen, for me has been a really tactical problem solving approach, and it's had success so far.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, now is there a moment, and I really particularly with Varennes, which I know it's 7 years, but it's still several years before we see something in the ground. I don't know, has there been a moment where you wondered if it was all worth it? Or you've come up to that big challenge and there doesn't seem to be a way around?
No, Varennes is on track, and I'm very excited about it still. But when I started Dorsey, and I'm not sure you know this story, Andre, it was 20 something years ago, and I was a senior manager doing real estate consulting at one of the accounting firms, and on track, doing very well, and a good job, people working for me. And I had an opportunity to start with Dorsey, and it was me, and I wanted to hire one other person. And at the time, we had half-built condo retail projects. I had condo projects that I had to cancel. I had partnership fight issues. I had banking issues. I had a half-empty office building, is what I was going to be moving into to move forward. And it was a interesting decision to make. I asked a lot of people who I trust in the industry what they would do. It was unanimous: don't take a move. Stay where you are. It's much better. I listened to myself. I talked to my wife, and it all came down to people and trust. And the people who only asked that I was dealing with, I developed a great sense of trust and admiration for. And I decided to make a move and take a risk. And that was 21 years ago. And since then, it's been extremely exciting, and I'm very satisfied.
Great story. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here from the audience, and let me just see. Let's start with the first one, Chris Gilbert, because I think everybody's going to have some thought on this. What is the likelihood of affordable housing becoming its own asset class adopted by private and public companies, especially those currently involved in acquiring, developing, and managing purpose-built rental? What will it take to become its own asset class accepted by developers, investors, et cetera? Anybody want to grab that one?
Caroline, do you want to take it?
I will. Maybe I shouldn't, but sure. No, I mean, it could. I think fundamentally it goes back to what we're talking about, which is actually looking at things differently. And you can't apply like the solutions that have worked for traditional private for-profit development to affordable housing. And so I think that there are a lot of people trying to do things, and I think there's a lot of people doing very good work. But I think sometimes, I'll even have discussions with people and they're looking for me to give them some like magic solution as to how it's gonna look exactly like every other private project they've ever done. And the answer is it's not. It's difficult, but it's doable. But it also means that like the development industry needs to change. And, a lot of people need to come to the table and work together and compromise. So I think it comes down to people also just actually getting everyone working together and everyone being willing to say like, I'm going to do things a little bit differently than I'm comfortable doing them.
Thank you, Carolyn. David, I think at the very beginning when you were speaking, you said something to the effect of that your vision, I suppose, of city building is that it included people, from A to Z. It wasn't just for, I guess, the haves versus the have-nots. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on that question about affordable housing. Clearly, you believe it's an essential component of a good city, a livable city, and a thriving city.
Yeah. So my opinion would be, I mean, this is a tough question, but I think we'd like to believe at Habitat for Humanity that we have created an asset class, and it's a maybe it's a mini asset class right now, and maybe 50 a year needs to become 1,000 a year before it's truly an asset class of its own. But I think, you know, based on the fact that we've got a curve where housing prices over 10 years have gone up 4.5 times higher than incomes, I think if we don't make this an asset class pretty quickly, then we're going to have a much worse problem on our hands than we even do today.
Salima, you've worked with a lot of these players, the Daniels of the world and so on. What are your thoughts about that?
I think about it kind of two facets. What comes to mind, because you know we're talking to people in business school, there's a great book, an old book, but it has to do with international development, and it comes to mind for me here. It's called Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And the whole premise of the book is that there's a massive market to be served, but you have to think about things differently. So Coca-Cola being a huge player in Africa, Unilever doing you know, daily use packages of soap instead of bars of soap that we see in North America. It is, I think the potential is there for affordable housing to be a massive asset class and financial contributor too, for fees to be had, for companies to be built around them. We do have the players in the market today, but I think that I think as long as we have the growing divide between rich and poor in our society, that we're going to be fighting against the highest and best use of land. And there's a huge nut there that has to get cracked in order for this to actually become an asset class like the others.
Jeff, I don't know. I mean, vision for Varennes presumably includes what we would call affordable housing, a mixed housing you referred to. How are we going to do that?
Well, I think we'll look at a number of different models, and we'll be very diverse on it. I think we'll look at housing affordability across different built forms and types. So it might be anything from additional, you know, granny suites to walk-ups to moving forward to family type units focused. There will be some, I'll say, sort of not-for-profit housing affordability, probably integrated within the community. But if I can create a wide range of housing built forms, which is different than your maybe typical 40 by 120 lot versus your 500 square foot, 25, 30 story tower condo, something in between, I can create something that's going to become more affordable to a wider range of people. And that's how we plan to accomplish that.
Yeah, you know, it seems that there's a couple of questions here, and I'm going to try to wrap them up into this, just to continue from this question. It seems to me that, you know, it's, affordable housing more or less is not on its own. To Salima's point, it's not economic. So it either takes some sort of government policy that basically incentivizes developers to create that housing, and maybe it takes a different mindset about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And Salima, you've given an example of a project that you worked on in which you feel you created a lot of public benefit without sacrificing bottom line, perhaps even enhancing that bottom line. So there's a couple of questions here that sort of go around this thing. And one question, I'll read them both because they kind of tie in. One question was actually directed, in fact, both are directed to you, Salima, but I'd like to hear from everybody as well because it involves everyone. The question is, what is the culture like at Creatio? How is it different from the private developers, or I guess smart centers you worked at before? And then another question, based on your experience working with the private and public sector, what are the differences you see when it comes to interest, values, and vision? And I just wonder if you can, by contrasting those things, you can see some sort of opportunity to, you know, take the best of both worlds and do something with that.
So the question on culture quickly, I mean, one is public sector and one is private sector, so they are vastly different. One thing that I wanted to mention in my story, and I was conscious of time, was just the fact that we would not have success in our organization if it wasn't for experiences in the private sector. The rigor that the private sector brings, the experiences of how to do real estate development and understand pro forma and where things tick, what is the financial concerns, what are the banks going to be looking for, what are all of those aspects it takes to bring a project together, are really critical. And I think at Creatio, the beauty is that you have this blend between people that understand that kind of rigorous private perspective with the desire for city building from the public perspective. So the culture is kind of a combination of those two, which does create tension in moments, right? We have to make decisions between what are we doing and why are we doing it, and what interests are we trying to achieve in any certain file. And so talking about developers, I think that there's those that like Jeff, they are from the community and they're concerned about their community and they're willing to put in a little bit, to use the language of Habitat for Humanity, sweat equity to make a really great project that has different components work. And then there's those that are not there yet. And I think, I hope that the more projects that we do that have multiple components, that have affordable housing, that are an interesting mix of uses, they set examples for the developers that aren't there yet.
Yeah, maybe if more of us followed our bliss, we would get to that place where that tension that you mentioned, which is a creative tension that results, I think, probably in the best outcomes. We'll have even more of that. And I'm kind of interested in your thought, and we're going to wrap this up quickly, so I'll give you a second or minute or whatever to answer. But Carolyn, because you've had that experience where, as a lender, in a for-profit, and you're still for-profit, but now with more purpose, or at least a different purpose. So I just wonder if you can comment on that, dichotomy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to me, that's the best part of my job is that if we're looking at any deal, we actually do start by talking about what is the impact. And I always joke that leads to usually just like a huge debate because it's a bunch of people who care and have opinions at this company. But yeah, I think that the key is to not just look at the financial, because that's not the only metric, especially if you're talking about building a city. And, at the core of what we're trying to do is we're challenging, what's the role of a bank? And traditionally, the role of a bank is not just to make money. The role of the bank is to be an intermediary. So between people who want to save their money and people who want to borrow money and build a community. And so if you're just looking at what, 5 years, 10 years might make the most sense for that one project on a financial basis, you're missing the bigger picture. And that's basically how we're in the situation that we're in now. So exactly like the things that Salim is talking about is you need to actually look at what are also the community or environmental impacts and what is the long term, because there absolutely is, there is money to be made in terms of affordable housing in the long term. But if you're looking for the shortest, quickest, easiest way to make money, then it's probably not that. But I also think that's super boring. So hopefully that's not what you're going to do.
Okay, we don't want to be bored. All right, listen, we're running out of time, so before we hand it back to Lirad to close us up here, I'm just going to go around the table and ask you for any final thoughts, and if you have any suggestions in terms of resources or stuff that people can think about or look at. And I'm going to start with Jeff and go backwards from our the way we started with the story. So Jeff, any final thoughts from what's been said, or you want to share with us?
No, I think it's been very informative, and I think there is a way to incorporate some of this discussion we're talking about for a greater purpose in the public sector and in the private sector both. I think that's important. In terms of resources, there's a poem behind me right now called Desiderata, written about 1927, which I think is very worthwhile. And if anyone's interested in hearing a bit about the project I mentioned, there's a website, www.varain.com.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Salima.
So fundamentally, I think this conversation has been about leadership and personal leadership. And so for me, I start the day off every day with the HBR management tip of the day. It's about leadership, and it just gets you in that headspace of thinking about people before you're thinking about numbers.
Thank you very much. That's a great thought. Carolyn.
Yeah, so tying into what the poll question was, and we were joking about this earlier, but I'm actually going to recommend Oprah's podcast, Super Soul Conversations. And that actually started in 2017. So I also recommend you go back and start in 2017. And one of her first guests was Brene Brown. You'll notice she has thought leaders from all sorts of like religious disciplines, also very successful business people. But I actually found that has been one of the most influential podcasts I've had, and like whether podcast or book, in terms of getting me back to like, you know, what do I actually care about, and not what's the job title you want or compensation or things like that. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Carolyn. And David, we're going to close with you.
Yeah, nothing earth shattering for me. I would just really encourage people as they, you know, graduate from Schulich or other unnamed schools to really think about how they can contribute to their communities. And it doesn't have to take a lot of effort, but doing something you're passionate about really makes your life hum. And I've never gone to a meeting, I don't think, with Habitat for Humanity that I didn't come out afterwards feeling empowered and sort of invigorated by.
You know, just to close, I tested the questions we started at the beginning of the thing with the panel, and I got 3 people saying their vote was for Oprah, and then one guy was thinking about it. So Jeff, in the end, who are you going to go with?
I'm going with Warren Buffett, but not because of his investment acumen, which I think is great. I respect Warren Buffett for the fact that he is giving almost his entire net worth to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And with that, between polio vaccines, AIDS medication, sanitation for water, he's going to save tens of millions, if not 100 millions of lives. And that's very important.
And the humility to say, you know what, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm just going to let him run my money. I think that's something pretty cool. Anyway, with that, over to you, Lyra, to close us up. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, panelists.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just to close this off, I wanted to bring up a line, take one from Jeff and Verain, which is the everyday extraordinary. And I think everyone on this panel has done just that. They've taken the everyday and they've made it extraordinary by linking their personal values with the work that they do. And I can see that there's lots of positive change that's being made from this panel right here. So before I let everybody go, I just want to make a little pitch to episode 3, which we have airing on Wednesday, June 24th at 4 p.m. And as we continue to focus on the humanity, that element in real estate, and given the social environment that our world is in right now, we thought it would be timely to have a conversation about the ideas and systems embedded in company cultures and how they affect some people differently than others, and what we can personally do to be mindful of this. So on that note, you can look out for some communication for that in an e-blast next week. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that you found this conversation as equally as insightful and exciting as I did, and we will see you next time. Thank you.